What's up, Judd?
What's going on, Alex? Good to see you.
How's California treating you?
About the truth, actually, I talked to one of our teammates is in Orlando today, and she was very much complaining about the heat and the humidity. So yeah, it's pretty nice here now.
I love the heat, as stupid as that sounds. I'm just used to it, and like I like the cold every once in a while, but like I'm just used to the sun and shorts and t-shirts at this point that I don't hate it anymore. It's just I embrace it.
Well, you would hate California.
Yeah, for sure, and Boston. Look, I'm really excited to get everybody talking because you have a different business model and something that we could all learn from. But before we get into crazy business talk and all that, let's get into you personal so we meet. Everybody gets you, but we're gonna be friends. So you grew up in Florida, and then what happened?
I tried to get out as quickly as I could. I went to college in New York. Actually, this is a fun story. Maybe, I don't know how personal it's going to get, but my wife and I dated in high school. And so I went to New York for college, and she went to school in Chicago. And then 10 years later, the reason I ended up in California is because we wanted to get back together, and neither of us wanted to go to each other's cities. We chose LA kind of randomly. We had some friends out here. I was working for a design company that had an office out here, so I was able to kind of keep my job. Yeah, we kind of chose it randomly. So we both grew up, we're both Florida, Sarasota, products of Sarasota, products of Florida. Although I got lucky, I have to say. I went to this, it was a public school, but it was a public magnet school called Pineview. And it was like 2nd grade through 12th grade. And that was actually a really good experience. And I still have a lot of awesome friends from there. And I think if I had gone to regular Florida schools, I may not have made it.
University of Florida?
I would have been a UF.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So they have what is it, like the Florida Scholars Program? Were you part of this?
Well,
they really wanted me to do that. They really wanted me to do the free college, but I did the expensive college.
Out of that free ride. But so I bet your family loved you because both of you are from the same city and you went 3 hours time difference.
I moved them out here actually 5 years ago. So my mother-in-law still lives in Sarasota. My parents are out here now, and actually my sister's out here. My mom went to nursing school in Boston, and they met in college at Clark in Massachusetts, and my mom went to nursing school in Boston, and they wanted to move to California. And then my grandparents at that time retired down to Sarasota, and they went and visited, and they're like, this is just as good. Like, don't need California, I'll go to Florida. They made a horrible mistake that took me 35 years to rectify.
Well, this little maneuver is gonna cost us 51 years.
So they moved to Florida instead of California, and that's how I ended up there.
So now your entire family gets to pay California taxes. All good. Yeah.
Well, retirees, I don't know exactly how it works with Social Security and stuff, but I think they're okay. And I say this often too, but here's my argument for Florida. You got a 10x better state at 2x higher average tax rate. So you've got a good arbitrage there. But when you factor in 0, it's infinitely higher.
Yeah.
So that's a little different. Yeah.
Okay. Outside of startups, what does Judd do for fun?
I needed these questions ahead of time because I really don't have an answer.
This is fun or spitballing?
No, I know. I'm just saying, I mostly just work. So that's why the answer is going to be fun. What do I do for fun? Mostly, hang out. I have a 9-year-old, so try to spend as much time with her. So I try to work and then try to carve out as much time for her. So what else do we do for fun? I love gardening.
Not expect that one.
I got looking out of my garden. I've been getting into different types of plants. I started out mostly with cactus and succulents because I couldn't kill them. I have killed a lot of edible kind of tomatoes and herbs and stuff like that. So, but then now getting more into azaleas and camellias, rhododendrons, and trees, shade plants, tropicals. So a lot of gardening. What else do I do for fun? Hang out with fam, go gardening. Been into swimming.
But long distance, ocean, or like
lap swimming. I'd like to get into long distance, but I got to practice with my laps. I don't know. What do you do for fun, Alex? I need a better. And maybe I need to.
I used to love playing sports. Okay. But now it's hard to get my friends to play sports. So I try to hit tennis balls. I'm terrible at it, but I need one friend.
Yeah.
I work out all the time. I have a home gym.
Your friend the wall?
Yeah, I just me crying by myself. No, I try to work out as much as I can. It's like a mental thing for me. I have a home gym. And then anything where my phone doesn't get reception, think about skiing or scuba diving or snorkeling, anything that's outdoorsy, or I'm with my friends and I put my phone away.
Yeah.
I'm all in. I am all in.
So underwater, the swimming, you really can't.
So mental.
Yeah, you're under. It's I really like it. I've been a couple years now. Yeah, I don't know. I swam this morning. It's just a nice.
Yep. It's a great workout.
Yeah, good workout and just a weird good. Like either I got these. This is not that interesting, but I got these bone conducting headphones, which is really cool. You can load it with like podcasts, so you're kind of like really optimizing. Sometimes if you go silent, you want to think about a business problem or something. It's also a good place to think. So yeah, I like it under there.
It's like the sensory deprivation tanks. Have you done them?
I've never done it. No, I have a few. That's a very LA thing. There's like one.
I did it for problem solving. You get in your own head for an hour and just floating. It's called floating. It is awesome.
All right, I'm gonna try it. I'm a little.
Give it a shot. Yeah. All right, last trick question.
Trick question.
Yeah, if you could grab a beer, but anybody in the history of the planet, born or dead, who would it be and why?
Alive or dead? Huh.
Yeah, either. It could be anybody in the history of planet Earth.
God, I think this is my like alive and like maybe basketball hand, but like Doris Burke, do you know her? She's like a random basketball announcer.
I mean, she's doing the Knicks game today. Or she did the Thunder game yesterday.
Yeah, I think she's on the West Coast, but I don't know. I was thinking about I would grab a beer with DB.
I think she did the Thunder game yesterday. Yeah, I mean, she's
that's why I was thinking about her. I was like, she seems like a chill hang. I don't usually drink too much, but I would drink beer with Doris, talk about the game. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's my short answer.
Love it. Oh, love it. Awesome. Yeah. I have a sports management degree, so I'm a huge sports buff. So anything about sports, I'm all in.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's funny, you know, I'm obsessed with basketball, so I like to watch basketball. I'm not really a fan of any other sports, but then I'm like the extreme fan of basketball, like basketball analytics. And
okay, so hit me. You grew up in West Coast of Florida, no sports team. You have Miami and Orlando. How'd you get into basketball out early? And then you went to New York, right? So what'd you follow?
You know what it was is that I've been in the same fantasy basketball league for like 15 years.
In high school thing or right after high school? Or college?
It was, maybe after college. And as a way to, started with some friends from college and some random friends from LA. So it would have been after college, but now it's like everybody's spread out and it's been pretty consistent. Maybe the first 5 years was finding the different people who are going to pay attention. And then it's been pretty consistent for the last 10 years, but that's what got me deep into it. I think maybe just being competitive and wanting to win, and then just like, so I was always like a fan of the game, but now I'm like more, I guess, an obsessive. But yeah, I love basketball. And then it's a perfect game. It's like,
are you an NBA fan overall, college, or are you like a stats guy?
I'll watch college, but no, it's pure NBA. I mean, no offense to college or the W, but I feel like NBA, the like level of basketball is so high, and I like call it the single elimination is cool. I feel like the NBA should experiment more, like the single elimination. Yeah, like I don't know. They should just do more weird, fun, kind of high stakes stuff. And I feel like college does that well. So
we can talk about sports for the rest of the 10 hours.
Heat is your team. I got to shout out to Daniel and I. Daniel is on my team. We worked together a couple of companies. We went to a Heat playoff games when they were playing the Celtics, and they lost at home, but then I think they won on the road to go to the finals. That was like 3 years ago.
I've been a Heat fan since I was a little kid. I'm a huge basketball fan, but I'm a way bigger college football fan. To me, college football is by far. I went to a big school, so I've done national championships. I've been to NBA finals, but I have no interest in going to a Super Bowl, which is crazy. If it's so commercialized, like it's not in my bucket list. I've done the World Cup, but I have not done.
I've never been to a football game, but it feels like you're kind of far away.
All?
No, when I was little, I've been to a Bucks game, I guess. When I was little.
That's it?
I just feel like basketball, but I like want to sit close. Otherwise, I might as well watch at home. I'm kind of picky that way.
Okay.
Well, I moved to LA. Clippers were like real garbage, and you could go to Clippers games for like $20, so that became my thing. And so you'd be able to go to like Clippers, and then they got kind of annoying, and now they moved. The new stadium is expensive, so kind of out on the Clippers. They pulled me back in a little bit this year, but I don't know. I'm looking for a team. Maybe OKC. I like OKC.
Yeah, I think OKC is super fun. There's a lot of young teams.
I like the young kids, but it's funny. People ask I'm like rooting for just more basketball or high drama or 7 games. Game sevens. Yeah, I was like rooting for the Timberwolves last night.
Who I wanted to win this year was I wanted Cleveland and OKC, like the ultimate anti-NBA matchup.
Totally.
2 small market teams are.
Yeah. Well, you might have Indiana, I guess. Indiana.
No, I really wanted Cleveland.
Interesting. Well, it's always drama. Always, you never know what's going to happen. So I love it.
All right. So walk us through. You went to college in New York, and then what was your entrepreneurial journey after that? Like, how'd you end up over here?
Well, I definitely was an entrepreneur. I was a computer science major. Actually, before that, I was in an engineering college, kind of like accidentally. mentally, I guess. I went to Columbia and they separate the undergraduate engineering from the undergraduate liberal arts. And I guess I checked a box to go to the engineering school. I don't remember. It's kind of crazy that they make like 17-year-olds decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives.
You got to change like 3 times after that usually.
I didn't change, but I protested by not doing any of the engineering prerequisites. And so by my end of my second year, I was like not on track to graduate on time. I was taking classes and doing fine, but I wasn't like taking enough classes towards one specific major to finish on time. And so I did a transfer from the engineering school to the regular school thinking like I didn't want to be in engineering more. But right before, I think the semester before I transferred, took intro to computer science. And so I got approved for this transfer, which was like hard to get approved for. At the same time, I actually decided I was going to major in computer science. I ended up sort of still on that track. And I had to stay I had to do like 2 summers. I worked for the radio station in college, which is a great life hack. I got free housing, Barnard College Radio. It's very cool. I think I caught up with like a summer school class or 2. And I graduated. But computer science major in 2004, did not learn a lot of practical skills, learned a lot of like math skills. Actually, I was an AI. It was funny. I did AI.
Machine learning.
Yeah, which is, look, I think the foundations of all the AI stuff did get invented in the 60s, but it was definitely like a sleepy area that I did not believe in at the time. I was like working on these projects. I think I did this like natural language processing research project with like on a PhD team. And I'm like, this is the stupidest thing ever. We were researching like charisma. Can you tell if speech is
correct? Like a human?
No, like can you detect charisma in the speech or something like that? And I was like, this is never going to matter. Now it's probably very important. Could have been a good pursuit. So I had no practical skills, but I got a job working at a startup. And I took the job because it was like down the street from my house. I found it on Craigslist. And I lived in South Brooklyn and I would like walk to work every day. And I had no skills. And I would like pick up egg and cheese sandwiches. And we would like work out of their office. And I remember it was like 4 or 5 people. There was like team in India who was working overnight. And I was sort of like a front end developer trying to build. So the application is like people are using these like crazy Excel spreadsheets and like, billions of dollars of option trading is happening in these like, weird scripts on Excel spreadsheets. And so like, isn't there a better way where you don't have to use Excel? And the problem was that I think the solution was that they built like something that was just as complicated. It was like a visual programming language for finance. So it was like plugging in data and doing graphs and building these like option models, but through these, it's kind of cool. It was like there was this program I was really into at the time called Max MSP, which is like a music software, do digital signal processing by like plugging different modules in together. And so they kind of had that same concept, but for like math for like black holes models or something. So I don't know. I didn't know any of this. So I was just like making the graphics we were programming in C++ and Visual Studio C#, not C++, which was like a weird C version. And I was like the worst programmer ever because I didn't have any practical skills. And I was just sort of like sitting there all day trying to get like something to work by like brute forcing it and working like crazy hours. I would be like 9 to 9 every day because that was like the schedule that they were working.
Yeah, New York hours.
Yeah. And like, in retrospect, it was fun. But at the time I was like, this is terrible. What am I doing with my life? Well, the other thing is like, I definitely am not a programmer because I would work all day and I'd like be unable to communicate in English. I'd be like sort of stuck in my own head and, you lose the ability to talk at the end of the day. So it was a fun experience. I love those guys. It was a fun project, but I probably got like a bad idea about what startups are like. And I think like we probably also made mistakes in the sense that like we weren't talking to customers a lot. I think we had this idea of what the thing was supposed to be like. It was hard to build. So we were like in this like year-long build phase. And I was just doing whatever they told me to do. I think ultimately we could have maybe built like a way crappier version and iterate, like the lean startup probably wasn't written at the time. Anyways, I did that for about a year. And then a job I applied for when I got out of college, they called me back too late. They were like, hey, we're ready to bring you in. And I'm like 3 months later, I was like, I already have a job. So I called them when I was looking to leave. And it was this really cool design studio, like a design agency called Huge. And it was started by it was an ironic name because it was like 10 people. I started with 2 people and they called it Huge. It was in Dumbo, Brooklyn, which is a very cool place to work. Yeah, they just had like an amazing collection of like really smart people. And they were IKEA was their main client. We were like doing like IKEA e-commerce. The first project I worked on them was JetBlue. We were moving like all the websites were like corporate sites. Like here's an airline. And then we talked to customers. They're like, well, I just want to book tickets and look for deals. So we made the whole website like tickets and deals, which at the time was pretty radical. It was very like simple. It was just like go to the website, search for stuff and see what the deals are. So that was really fun. And then, yeah, I just ended up working on a bunch of different really cool kind of like mostly websites. And then eventually, so this is 2005 on. So I guess the iPhone drops in 2007, eventually working on like iPhone apps a few years later, and put me in this weird department called user experience. It was cool because, yeah, right now the process,
it's normal,
yeah, that's like a big part of everybody's process, and UX is kind of like the interconnected tissue. But at the time, it was kind of novel. Like other agencies had like graphic design, and then they had programmers, and then they had this idea that like UX will be research and strategy and kind of like wireframes and all the things that like what the product is and what the soul of it is before you get to design and before you get to building it. And so that was a really cool group to grow up in and like actually learn what to do and work on all these interesting projects and get kind of dropped into all these different like work scenarios, like, yeah, just different like business problems. Cause you'd go to a client, like one of the big projects we worked on was Target was moving off of the Amazon platform and needed to do their own e-commerce. And so like we spent probably like 3 months like with them in Minneapolis, but they created this executive team across the company to try to like figure out kind of like what to do. And we were just like sitting there embedded with these like really smart, we knew how to make stuff like simple and pretty and internet-y, but you know, they understood their business better than, so you're kind of just like in this cool like crash course on everybody's business for months. So kind of like consulting, I guess, but through the lens of like building digital products. And so I love that job. I thought I was going to do it forever. And then back to the earlier story, my wife and I moved to LA. I was able to keep my job. We had like a small presence in Los Angeles, ended up going really well. We got a bunch more like California clients. We opened an office in SF. So eventually, yeah, it was like a big part of the company. The company grew really fast. So when I joined, it was like maybe 15 people. And then when I was there, it grew to a couple hundred. And I think in 2007 or so, it sold to Interpublic Group. So kind of like a mini acquisition.
And then 08 happened. So I imagine what happened.
08, yeah. They survived 08, and then I moved in 09. So actually, I think it was okay because, yeah, 08 was crazy. I mean, especially like living through it and, you know, watching your 401k and being old or whatever. Well, you know, my first like kind of major thing. I think we were lucky because we were like on these like digital budgets, not marketing budgets. So like the projects we were working on were like long-term important. We had enough big clients. So it definitely like wasn't chill, but I think the agency survived pretty well. I don't know. I love that job. I thought I was going to do it forever. I just wanted to be a designer. I thought I was a designer. I guess I was like a corporate designer. And then I guess where the story changes, I bought a house in 2011, February of 2011 in LA.
Decent timing. I mean,
yeah, it ended up being really, well, it ended up being affordable. I'd been working then for like 7 years, like saving money every year. My wife and I weren't married yet, but we were together. She got a job with LA County. So yeah, it was an amazing time because, you know, I mean, it was an expensive house. It was, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but now that house is it ended up selling for like 3x more. Yeah. So it was a time, and mortgage rates were really low too. And so it was a time where actually like a weird blip in the matrix where you could actually afford to buy a house. And so I went through the home buying process and I was like, this process is so fucked. Yeah. And I can't believe my agent got paid $18,500 to do this. Yep. And yeah, all the things that I think we've been talking about since. So that's how I ended up. And I was just the right mix of like naive and had some skills, which is like, I think the perfect startup mix, right? If I knew what I knew how hard it was, if I knew how crappy it was, I wouldn't have done it. So I was just like naive enough and just sort of skilled enough at like building software and making stuff. And so it took me a couple years. It took me I bought the house like at the beginning of 2011. I probably was like thinking about it for a little bit. And then I started my first company in 2014. And it took me a while to like recruit, like my two co-founders. One of them is like one of my best friends, still now our CTO at Deferred. And one of my other actually really good friends, I asked, and he was like, I don't think real estate is cool at all. He's actually the CEO of this thing called Urbit, which is like this distributed computing platform, kind of like a internet too. But you should talk to his wife's younger brother. He works at Amazon. He's a developer. He hates working at Amazon. You should talk to him. And I met him maybe once. And now that's Peter, and he's like one of my best friends. And, you know, we started the company together. So you gotta just ask people if they want to join your thing. And if not, ask if their wife has a little brother.
Okay. So then you went through that company. Walk us through how you end up at Deferred. What was the aha moment to start Deferred?
Well, so that was like a pretty long journey. We ended up starting a company. Again, still didn't know what we were doing. We got lucky in that we got into Y Combinator and we went through YC in 2015. So that was really probably the luckiest thing that ever happened in my life. We went from like nobody caring about our stupid project that probably didn't even make sense and sucked And so like, oh, now people will pay attention to you, at least listen to your pitch. And, you know, we still had to pitch probably like 60 investors at a demo day. And we got, I think, 11 checks or something like that. So it's not easy, but it's easier by far. And just like really good, back to like learning stuff, like really good advice. Like I guess I learned a lot about how to make products that people want to use, and just like was a semi-competent designer, but definitely didn't know about how to start a company, what's important, what's not important, like the ethos of it all. And I think YC, which is very cool because all their advice is basically like free and online, and they keep repeating it over and over again. And then I just get to repeat it when people ask, just like, what's the one metric that matters? Look at it every week. What are you going to do to move the needle every week? And then go, and that stuff. And then a lot of the cultural stuff about like, I don't know, how to set up a company and how to hire and everything was really useful. So we ended up succeeding despite ourselves out of that experience. The company was called Open Listings. We help people buy homes. So it was like a buy-side real estate brokerage. The idea was you just do it all in the app. We would give you back 50% of the commission that would go to the buy-side realtor. So kind of like a better experience and savings, which we'll come back when we get to the deferred story because it was the same exact fit. But people really liked it. I think we thought we were going after experienced home buyers who've done it before, like somebody like myself who's like, well, now I know I really don't need an agent. Ended up kind of finding really good fit with like first-time millennial home buyers who just like didn't want to work with agents and wanted it to be tech driven and kind of like the Robin Hood of home buying. We built a really cool model. It was a marketplace model. So eventually we figured out that instead of bringing agents in-house, we would find really good agents that were distributed and give them our software. And they were happy to do it because even though they were getting less commission, we were just giving them clients who were ready to buy. Clients like it because they get the discount, and we were able to build a pretty sustainable business as like a marketplace there. Whatever, fast forward, we did that for 4 or 5 years, transacted a few $1 billion worth of homes, mostly in California. We expanded to a few states, and then we were going to raise, we actually had a term sheet for a Series B round, and Opendoor, the like iBuying company, we'd been close with. Also YC Network, like the founder had gone through YC before, and I think we had talked to at some point then. We'd always like stayed in touch, but I think they were taking the resale side of their business much more seriously. And I personally was nervous about like, God, I have to really scale this thing. And this $15 million of Series B pref is going to be like, really is profitable as they say they are. Well, the other thing is we had to figure out what we were going to do on the selling side. Like we knew home buying. We were like really dialed on home buying. We've been thinking about it for 5 years. The app worked really well. Like you could order a tour on your phone and we get somebody to show up. We would help you create the offer. We help you create an offer letter. Like we really nailed this like buying experience. But to create growth loops and to make the whole like company work, we really need to figure out selling. We need to figure out mortgage. We need to figure out some other attach. And these were all these things that like Opendoor was way further ahead on and kind of had the same priorities. So the pitch for them was like, you guys just get to focus on the thing you're really good at. We're about 45 people. Everybody moved over and we're like the buyer team. So it was like really good for the team. Cool for me because I could just like keep focusing on the same thing. And yeah, we kind of took a bet on Opendoor because they were a late stage private company. They were at the time of acquisition just raised hundreds of millions of dollars from SoftBank and were valued at like, so everybody's like, watch out, this is not the chillest situation. And you know, maybe they were right, or who knows who would be right on what time scale, but they closed the SoftBank round and some more rounds, and then they went public, which was part of that crazy SPAC boom. And then it was COVID boom. And then, so yeah, I worked there from 2018 to 2021, which was like 3 very intense, crazy years, but ended up being good. And so learned about culture, I think the most thing, right? We had this culture that we had built organically and was very us, hadn't really given much thought to, but ended up like luckily was good. And then you take this like culture and these 45 or 50 people and you drop them in with this like totally different culture in this like San Francisco company. And so that was like really eye-opening because it was just like all the Opendoor people, brilliant people, very organized, like very written down, but just worked in a very different way and kind of interacted in a different way. And it was cool to learn some of the things, but it definitely taught me a lot about
probably centered you and push you towards what you think is best. And you learn from the other side of the table and you're like, this is my path. This is what I think we should go with.
Totally. And I think each company has its own, it's hard to mesh cultures just in general. But I think then we kind of, after that, leaned into, I think what was like uniquely ours and just basically how to go as fast as possible and have people be as excited to work together as possible. Those are the two things you're trying to optimize people's happiness and their velocity. And so I think if you do that, versus I think maybe Open Door is like optimizing for like memo quality.
When you're that big, you have different concerns, right? You have numbers and you raise so much money that you have to perform, and now you got to become profitable all of a sudden, and it's very difficult to flip the switch. What you do after that?
After that, we started a company. Somebody I met along that journey became my co-founder of a company that we started called Balance. Is my co-founder also at Deferred with the CTO from Open Listings. We had met him and he was running mortgage product at one of our partners and just became like really good friends, just brilliant dude who we really tried to get him to work with us. We tried to hire him relentlessly for like maybe 6 months. And the mortgage company he's working for ended up getting sold to SoFi. So he did a stint at SoFi, and then he did a stint at Zillow. And he slacked me one day, and it was ironic because I was working at Open Door and he was working at Zillow, and we were like competing at the time.
The iBuyer.
Zillow had the iBuyer business. He wasn't working on it. He was working on mortgage, but it was still funny. We'd have like a surreptitious Slack or something, or I don't remember what we communicated. But he was like, hey, I just saw something crazy. And it was basically a chart of the number of people who were behind on their mortgage after COVID due to forbearance. What people didn't understand is forbearance just means like stop paying your mortgage. Yep. And you're in this allowed period where you're not have to pay. But I think people misunderstood it and they thought they would never have to pay. They thought it was forgiveness, but forbearance just is a delay. At the time, a lot of people had taken this free option because I think they'd offered it to everybody. So people were taking it opportunistically. And then home values were ripping. The economy started working again because we put interest rates to zero. Yep. And our thesis was a lot of these people who are in forbearance, this is like a credit hit. This is going to be like bad for their credit and they're not going to be able to qualify for another mortgage. But if you underwrite them and you look at what the income disruption is or what the credit disruption was, and if you have a view on that, if the asset is strong and their equity is strong, these are actually a good group of homeowners that, there's really good homeowners in here who really what they need is liquidity to catch up. And then the other inspiration, so we saw this audience of people who had like spiked the number of people who were really going to have to find a solution to stay in their home. So that was the one thing. And then I think the other thing we were inspired by was the time, a lot of the success of rent-to-own companies. So Divvy being the main one, where they built these huge businesses on this essentially co-ownership model. So the idea was we put this co-ownership model and we applied it to existing homeowners as opposed to home buyers. In the specific segment of existing homeowners who were had really good income still and really high equity, but just had bad credit. And so we thought we could find kind of like the needle in the haystack homeowners who hit those. And if we did this co-ownership program, it'll repair their credit, it'll give them a lot of optionality, and either they'll be really performant or they'll buy us out. And then the other thing that we were doing was, buying homes. Home prices had gotten very expensive, and it was very hard for these rent-to-own companies or other companies to source inventory at a discount. But because we tapped into the special audience, sell a portion of their home at like a discount to fair market value in exchange for this very unique financing program that we have. It actually still exists, Balance Homes. I'll tell you the story of how it ended up going away and coming back. Really cool model. I think like really good program for the folks that could qualify for it. I think what was hard, it was really hard to qualify for. Yep. So we ended up doing about 80 investments. We built a portfolio of about $15 million worth of homes, mostly in the Southeast. That's how we met. We were at IMN trying to hustle for capital together. Or at least I was. You were just hanging out.
Was learning.
Yeah, seeing all the you're like seeing all these like esoteric models like mine that fail, so you guys can continue running the simple model, which is good.
I've been doing that since I graduated college. I got my ass kicked so hard that I just keep taking things from different places and being like, how do I beat that up? Oh, that's not gonna work. I don't know. Let's test it. And
it ended up being like the model was great, but yeah, hard to qualify for. Also, just really complicated. We were essentially inventing a whole new financial instrument.
So hard. Super hard to market and to teach people how to do it, and like to make it simple and to say it's so hard.
Exactly. And I think we've done a good part in that where we control. But then the other aspect of that is then you're creating a whole new capital markets, right? It's not, this thing that fits in this box that we have this budget for, and this.
It's liquid and it's,
it's basically like, we're like, oh, it looks like single family rental, but but it's this. And then also low credit consumers, we're not low credit. They just are distressed credit. They used to be high credit, now they're low credit. They're going back to high credit. So we had a lot of things. Yeah. Super hard business, super hard capital markets challenge, super hard product challenge. And I mean, weirdly, we solved many of it. Like it was really, the problem was interest rate environment. So it's a capital markets challenge, but we started out when it was very low interest rates. Our cost of capital was relatively reasonable. Yep. And then it went up and up and up. I think something like 20 plus rate hikes. Our borrowing costs to power our product ended up being, mid to high teens. And so you can't build a product that competes with any sort of mortgages with your cost of capital being mid to high teens. That's sort of why, so we had this portfolio, and the portfolio was pretty performant. I think something like it was performing well above pro forma, like, it was generating a mixture of cash. 15 to 20% of the people had already bought back their home, and those were all really good outcomes for the homeowner and for the portfolio. But we had no way to keep growing, to keep investing on that thesis. This was early money that we had, borrowed at a low interest rate to fund this part of this tranche of the portfolio. We just couldn't keep doing it. So that was a really hard situation because I think there were really no good options. The portfolio was worth something. The company was probably worth nothing because the strategy and everything didn't make any sense. We ended up deciding to sell the company and the portfolio to EasyKnock.
Yep.
That was probably not the best decision, just because right after we closed, they got sued by like 6 attorney generals.
Everybody went after them.
Everybody went after them. And at the time, I think they had issues in Texas that we had diligenced and looked at, but it was different. And that seemed contained to Texas. And it was about something specific around Texas homestead that they were dealing with. It was different from the attorney generals that came after them for, thinking the product wasn't well explained or that was somehow predatory. I actually don't believe that. I think sale-leaseback model is great. I think they were maybe cutting corners in certain ways and not operating the business totally right way. But I think the core product should exist, and otherwise these people have no other options and they're being kicked out.
I agree.
Yeah, I know you strongly agree. So I really believed in it. And then the other thing is we were marketing to the same customers. So we were looking for these needle in a haystack, really great income. They had a wider buy box. They also couldn't work with people who were in foreclosure, where we were okay to work with people who were in foreclosure. Yeah, it ended up, it was an interesting process, I think, but yeah, ultimately not the best decision and didn't work out well. For one of the reasons we had a couple choices, none of them super awesome, but we chose the EasyKnock path because all the employees were moving over. So it was we had a team about, I think maybe 15 or so people were able to move over to EasyKnock. So then when they got sued and had to sort of take a different direction, ultimately shut down, that was also really, really sad because
that's people you worked with,
Yeah, that was the main reason. We were well, at least, this is a bad outcome for our investors and us, but at least we can live to fight another day. And if we help them do well, this multi-product strategy could work. And then once they got sued by all the attorney generals, that was pretty much the end of it. The coda, the irony there is that their head of capital markets, actually the head of capital markets from Ribbon, which is another company that they had acquired that blew up. He's now the CEO of Balance, and they have the portfolio because the portfolio is still there and it's performant. And he's figuring out a way to keep growing it. Pretty cool. And we're trying to help him out because product could fight for another day. And honestly, the hardest challenges in those businesses were all capital markets and capital related. So it's exactly the right type of person who should be running that company. And hopefully they can continue to grow.
It will forever be your baby. So you want that thing to succeed in any way, shape, or form, because
totally
incubated it and brought it to life. So feel the same way from my first startup.
And then, all right, then short story about Deferred is
was
looking to do a 1031 exchange, came across this weird sleepy industry called the service that helps you do a 1031. I'll explain what it is in a second. Is called a qualified intermediary, or sometimes people call them an accommodator. And so we came across this weird qualified intermediary industry. We're what the hell is this? And so Section 1031 of the tax code, it's been in the tax code, been in the federal tax code for 100 years, since 1921. Basically what it allows is that if you sell a property that's held for investment, basically anything that's not your primary residence or vacation home, and you reinvest the proceeds into other real property, it doesn't trigger a taxable event. You basically rolled over your gains from one property to another, didn't become liquid, you never touched the funds, and therefore you kind of keep going. And so it is core part of real estate investor strategy, right? And a thing you hear about a lot, but not something I had spent a lot of time thinking about or dealing with. And then I think some of the other things that were interesting is of the property that could be exchanged, something like sub 10% property does get exchanged. So even though maybe $100 billion is exchanged per year, there's maybe a 10x larger opportunity if you figure out how to get people to do more exchanges, which would be very cool. And exchanges is good. People look at it as a tax hack, but I actually think it's cool. It takes kind of appreciated, under-leveraged, underutilized capital that's tied up in one thing, and it encourages you to move it to something else and to redevelop other properties and to stimulate the economy and find the highest and best use for real estate by taking these stodgy old depreciated properties and moving the money around. So I think it's a cool part of the tax code that spurs economic activity. But again, pretty esoteric, nobody knows about it. So to do the 1031 exchange, you have to use this qualified intermediary. And so we started looking at these businesses. There's about 400 of them. The main ones are owned by like the large title and escrow companies. The long tail is like mom and pop escrow agent or real estate lawyer who decides to do this kind of like with a small team, like a 1 to 4 person team.
So you see more attorneys and CPAs do this?
Yeah, well, you can't be a CPA. You could be a retired CPA. I mean, you could have the background of a CPA, you can have the designation, but I think it's interesting. In the tax code, it defines who's disqualified. So it's called a qualified intermediary, and it just says who it can't be. So it can't be like a principal in the transaction or a broker or a tax advisor. This adjacent industry spun up to be basically an intermediary that's not one of those things. And because the most similar businesses like a bank or a title and escrow, the large ones happen to be owned by title and escrow like Fidelity and First American and Republic, I think, and they all own Stewart. They all own kind of like some of the main ones. And then some of the big bank, or I guess maybe more mid-sized banks do own different QIs. I mean, the unifying theme was that all of them sucked and none of them use software. And
for sure. Yeah. Outdated, old processes.
Yeah, and we look at it really like you kind of have, well, 2 jobs. One job is the exchange compliant. So rules and checks and audits, so that's software. And then the second job is don't lose the money. And so moving money around with software and on fintech rails as opposed to banking, traditional banking, is just obviously better. And so I think just from first principles, technology should make this business better. And because it's this weird niche, and I think the overall industry it's not a huge industry. It generates, north of $1 billion worth of fees and interest every year, but much bigger than that. Oh, and then the other unlock is, so it's this sleepy thing. People think, every QI charges the same fee. They charge $1,000 to $1,500 to do the exchange. Plus they hide a bunch of junk fees. Like if you want me to wake up on a Friday after 6, I'll charge you $250. They call it a rush fee. Or they charge you wire free, even though wires are basically free now or should be built in the main fee, whatever. But you look at the books for a business like this, and they actually are making something like 70 to 80% of the revenue holding the funds. So it's actually a float business.
Yep.
In an exchange, the intermediary holds the funds for up to 180 days. Average is much less than that, but somewhere a couple months, they earn interest off the funds, not by doing anything weird. It's just by holding it in like a high yield savings account. We look at it and we're like, and nobody knows this. It's like a weird secret hiding in plain sight. And so a client is like, if you do a $5 million exchange and the QI holds the money for 90 days, it generates $50,000 in interest. Then you still get a bill for $1,500. And we're like, that's crazy. Long story short, we just decided to go no fee. Sometimes we don't make a lot of money on the short exchanges. And then we also share interest on the large dollar exchanges, which that's not a practice we made up. That's something that other QIs do, but it's like totally not transparent. Try to go to QI website and see what interest rate they're going to give you, and it's impossible, and it's negotiable, and they're going to say you get all the interest, but all the interest in their mind is like 1%. We pay 2.5% interest. It's all very transparent on our website. Yeah, mostly just building a lot of technology to make the process really safe and like secure for the funds. And then we've been able to hire like amazing exchange officers. And instead of them, having to go click a bunch of buttons and fill out forms and do a bunch of stuff that they shouldn't be doing, all they do is talk to customers all day, and the software kind of automates the rest of it, which has been very cool. So
awesome.
I jumped around a lot there, but we've been.
No. I know Flo really well from the insurance world. Mm-hmm. I didn't know you're legally able to do that from the 1031 world, because it sits there sometimes for 6 months and people are just trying to figure out what to do with it. And I didn't know that they could just take the money and invest it and then bring it back. I've done sweeps for like banks and holding accounts and not security deposits, but operating accounts, things like that for properties. I didn't know this was an option. This is very interesting.
And it's like a dirty secret in the QI industry where everybody's earning interest. We're all using the same banks that are set for QIs. I don't know why they're either not sharing as much or still sending a bill for the exchanges. So yeah, we're trying to fix all that.
Cool. And then who do you say is your core customer today? Are you going direct to consumer or mostly to the QIs who already have the relationships? Like what is your core customer today?
Well, I mean, we're still figuring it out. The core is like just be the best exchange platform. I think what's cool about exchanges is it's a pretty uniform process. Whether it's $100 million hotel or a $100,000 single family rental, you're kind of doing the exact same thing. You get a closing statement, you're taking the money, you're helping them identify, and then you're spending the money. So it's good that it's kind of size and asset class agnostic. We also operate in all 50 states. There are some state level specifics that you have to be aware of, but we've been able to sort of model those in software and are pretty smart on that. I think it's more a question, it's like a distribution question, which is the end user, the end client, maybe they know QI, maybe they've done it before, but we've talked to people who do exchanges and they have no idea even who they used, right?
It's not that important. You're so worried about the sale and what are you going to do with the money. If you're going to pay taxes, you're like $1,500. I don't care. Like, just
yeah. Not their fault that they didn't remember the name of Orexco.
Yeah.
What it taught us is that, okay, who's telling them who to use? That is the person we need to get in front of. That's been the strategy. And I think it comes from a variety of sources. It comes from real estate agents, real estate brokers, especially ones that are like selling the 1031 exchange as part of their practice. So we work with a lot of commercial brokers who are using 1031s as a reason why their client should sell, because they can show that that money, without having to pay taxes, can be better used and better leveraged and create more cash flow through these other opportunities. And then follow the incentives. Brokers like it because they get double commission. They get they get the sale.
Like Cushman, Marcus and Millichap, CBRE, that type of broker.
Yeah. I think like the Marcus and Millichaps of the world we do really well with, and that's kind of like our bread and butter, this like mid-market. They're going after our clientele, somebody with a highly appreciated multifamily building that's been owned for a while, and that those folks are looking to, hopefully they do the work of cold calling the client for 20 years and we do the work of cold calling them for 20 years, and eventually they'll recommend us. And then the other places people find out about QIs, title and escrow is another big one. Just at the closing table, working with title, a lot of them are a recommendation path. CPAs, so they can't be QIs, but they're going to tell somebody about a 1031 exchange. And then wealth advisors is another big one. So people talking to their wealth advisor who's looking to help them make the transition. So those are like the referral paths. So I think what's interesting about the business is we do a little bit of direct to consumer and it goes well, but I think the main growth paths are like finding these recommendation channels and getting in front of them.
Sidecar, can you guys handle ticks, tenant in commons?
Yeah, both ways. So you could be selling a tenant in common interest and exchanging, and then you can exchange into a tenant in common interest. That's probably more common because especially if like you're working with a large developer or like investment firm, they'll carve out a tick interest to that piece. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the hardest part of the exchange business, well, I have to ask the exchange officers. To me, being kind of a noob, is understanding who the taxpayer is. So one of the rules is same taxpayer on both sides. You've got a partnership that is a bunch of LLCs are in the partnership with different owners and different members. So decoding who the true taxpayer is and then making sure that matches on the other side and understanding the regs to say what matches and what's allowed and what is within a safe harbor holding periods. I mean, if it's me, whatever, it's Judd buying and Judd selling, I'm simple. But if it's a complicated structure, making sure that that structure is compliant and held through the exchange and understanding all the weird scenarios that you can follow. Okay, you're gonna buy it in this structure and then you can make this change, or then you can add this leverage. And so really understanding the nuance of entity structuring and what's allowed is one of the core competencies.
So walk me through just like a sample transaction that you guys have done, so everybody learns whether like they can put themselves in those shoes. Like walk me through a sample transaction for the customers. Yeah. What does that look like?
Well, okay, I'll try to do it in a differentiated lens, because I think if you're calling a normal QI, well, it's 501 and they will call you back next Monday. Take your information on the phone and half will be wrong and you'll get the docs 3 days later. So that's like the baseline experience we're competing against. I think for us, you either call in or go online, and we only need a few pieces of information from you. We need the address, who the taxpayer is, some information about what we expect the deposit to be. And so you fill out like a pretty short lead form and immediately you get a contract back, which is pretty cool. Then we collect all the other information you need, which is just the information about the property you're selling, the contact info of your title and escrow, and that's it. So I mean, we could start an exchange in like 30 seconds if you speed run it a minute. Everything's pretty automated in the sense that like the client is able to sign their documents, and then they also get access to a portal, which is very unique, where they can see the details of their exchange. They can enter in the information. They actually have tasks. So when tasks arise, they can do their tasks, which is pretty cool. And so it's pretty straightforward. Like a lot of it is in the setup, right? You understand the entity, you understand the property that's being sold as the first part of the exchange, and you understand who's involved in it. And once we have all that information, it pretty much runs on autopilot. We work with the escrow company that's selling the property to get on the settlement statement. So we actually become the seller, qualified intermediary for the actual seller. And then we're the recipient of the funds. And so we make sure that they have the wire instructions, that they've confirmed the wire instructions, and then we're ready. We open a bank account in the background, dedicated, like a segregated bank account just for their exchange funds. And so again, all that happens. That's been most of what we've been working on, the orchestration of this complicated thing, doing that correctly.
I'm thinking from personal experience, the dealing with outdated title companies and escrow companies and attorneys that are like, what are you guys doing? Who are you guys?
Yeah.
Getting in the middle.
A lot of reply all threads is the thing we joke. The hardest thing to automate away is a reply all thread with like an attorney, a title escrow company, and maybe 2 QIs. So if you can figure that out, that's like the holy grail.
No, I'm thinking of HUD statement and version after version after version, getting quotes in a closing, and you have escrows for rent payment and deposit and water bills, and it all changes right at the end. Just that craziness at a closing table.
Yeah. So thankfully we're not like creating that. We're kind of a taker of the craziness. I've been there a million times. The thing that we do need to be involved in, which is really helpful for clients, and again, another reason to be proactive, not have the people do any busy work, and soon AI will fix a lot of this, but there's things that are qualified exchange expenses and things that are not. So there's things that our client may want to pay outside of escrow and not put in exchange funds because it's not going to be taxable. Versus if they take in exchange funds, then they may have some taxable proceeds. So helping them understand what is a qualified exchange expense and not is another kind of like core competency in there. But yeah, that part is we spend a lot of time on, and it's pretty dialed, and there's a lot of permutations of like who the signers are, who the entities are, multiple properties if you're going through multiple exchanges, etc. So, but all of it works online. It's pretty simple form, and you get access to the portal.
If they have an LLC, do they have to upload like an operating agreement or anything like that? So you are able to start mapping it out with them?
Yeah, we grab the operating agreement or whatever the relevant partnership agreement is, and we actually have to go in and make sure that it's what they say that it is. So we're going to look and see, who's the managing member and who's the signer, and is it disregarded? We'll ask them that during like the intake form, but we go in and verify all that. We got to make sure that it's correct. We get that either from the client, or sometimes in the case you can get it from escrow because they've already kind of like organized all the docs. We're kind of determining the same thing that escrow is determining, ultimately who the taxpayer and signers are, but we go and do our own review work. The rest of it's pretty straightforward. The rules for the 1031 are you got to identify within 45 days. So we do a lot of reminding about the identification period. We try to help people identify, refer them to places that they may not be looking, like you guys, as a replacement property option. I think the identification is kind of the most stressful part of the 1031 for clients by far.
They're buying the asset after they got to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's like they're not just making a timing decision; they're making an investment decision. Sure. And ultimately, it's one of the things that's also blocking sometimes, like whether they're going to sell or not. I think one of the reasons we like being no fee is because early on we started talking to smart investors, and a lot of them are like, we just opened an exchange on everything, even if we don't know what we're going to do, because the $1,000 fee is worth it for the option of not paying taxes. We're like, that's really smart. But a normal person isn't paying $1,000 for a thing that they're not sure of.
That is actually really, really, really smart. It's a cost of doing business. It's with $1,500 when you have a couple $1 million exchange.
But Alex, what if I told you don't even have to be on that $1,500?
No. Wait, there's more. Yeah, I know. That's awesome.
And you're gonna earn, and if it's over $1 million, you're gonna earn interest. So we're gonna pay you. We pay you to do an exchange.
Cash management strategy. Everybody has to come up with it when you're dealing with big dollars, because if you have millions of dollars that are sitting idle, might as well revenue and offset some expenses. Make some complete sense. Exactly. I'm with you.
Everybody should try to do an exchange. If you don't identify after 45 days, you get your money back on the 46th day, which is one thing that people don't know. Some people think it's stuck till the 180th day. And so 45-day free option, why not? Everybody should come to deferred.com and put their money here.
It's really, really smart. It's a cash management play. I love it.
And then so we built a way so they can identify through a form, like a traditional form that everybody uses, like a PDF, or we built a way for them to do it online, which is pretty cool. So you go in, you say what you're going to identify, you actually can create and sign the letter all on the website, on the portal, which is pretty cool. A lot of the software is on the back end. So we, as the exchange company, have a bunch of tasks. So a lot of that's like the client has certain tasks, and then we have 5x more tasks, making sure everything's orchestrated, making sure that we don't miss an identification. We send them many reminders. We're calling them 1 million times a day up into the 45th day, giving them resources, helping them figure it out. Again, trying to spend as much time as possible with the client and not as much time looking at calendars or wondering what you're supposed to do all day or creating busy work. And then the rest of it is just sending the money back out. So we receive the money, the client identifies, and then we buy the property on their behalf. So we're another party to a second escrow or multiple escrows in terms of understanding where the money's supposed to go and making sure that the amounts are correct and making sure that the wire instructions have been triple verified, and then closing out the exchanges. So I think it's like a title and escrow business, but it's a much more linear process, which we like. And so we have a lot of the same challenges as title and escrow, but I think it's a lot more automatable because everybody kind of has to go through that same flow, versus I find title and escrow to be a lot more open-ended and who knows what's going on, and it has to be really in reply all threads. So I think we've been mostly able to avoid needing to use reply all threads to power the business.
Yeah, and then title and escrow is dealing with a lot of other parties that they can't control.
Yeah.
A lien violation, an HOA, another mortgage, things that is not, they can't move. You guys have a little more, you could be a little more hands-on, even though you're like a third party, but you're still, the money has to come from you, so they got to come through your platform. What asset classes do you see the most that people are doing right now?
It's an interesting question. So this is actually one thing that's interesting. We bought an existing qualified intermediary when we were going from 0 to 1. So we purchased a business out of San Diego that was called Plenty Financial, and before that it was called EA 1031 Exchange Advantage. And so a lot of the early volume is just, the remnants of a local business been operating for 35 years and their phone just continues to ring. And so
learning experience of things that work doesn't mean they went big and fast and did a lot, but it was still like the water was running through the pipes and it wasn't bursting. So you at least learned the experience.
Yeah, no, the water, I love the water running through the pipes is 100% the right analogy. There's this great book called Buy Then Build. Okay, yeah. It's I actually give mine away, so it's not on my bookshelf. Yeah, but the water through the pipes is the exact thing. Think about all the times as an entrepreneur. The amount of times going 0 to 1 where you have to find your first client and get the water throwing through the pipes to know if the pipes are working. So great to start with pipes with water flowing and then build a bigger pipe. That's been really cool. And so a lot of, especially from like that closed in Q4 of last year, a lot of the early clients are Southern California based. And so those tend to be a lot of single family rentals, condos, like a lot of single family is that business. And then, where we go after commercial real estate agents, we're targeting different asset classes. It depends on the person, right? And so like the brokerage and their specialty, but we do a lot of multifamily there. And then, we've seen it all over. We've seen a lot of commercial buildings, industrial, retail, really the gamut, land. I think people are exchanging out of all sorts of stuff. We see a lot of people just exchanging out of appreciated California buildings, and then they go into all sorts of different stuff. I think they go into single family, they go into single family rental. I mean, look, I think single family rental is really interesting because you've got an asset class that is super flexible, right? You've got, it can go right back to regular single family. It's always going to have demand. We're not making enough of it. I'm sure you're giving this pitch all day. Well, I just think it's been cool to watch exchangers do it because, maybe you're trading out of this apartment building that your family's had forever, but you're trading into a bunch of homes that you understand in markets that you can understand with dynamics that are pretty, that are pretty liquid versus trying to find a gas station or strip mall and trying to value it.
I've seen like 4 generations of 1031s rolled in. So at the end, it's like, at that point, it was like the grandfather passed it down and they're like, we just want something that's in the corner, that has a 15-year lease, that it's already ran its course and we just want to not worry about it. We don't care if we're overpaid. We're like, we're just good.
You better be understanding how to underwrite credit tenant and underwrite tertiary market location, and cap rate is just like it's just a risk measure, right? So you better, if it seems simple or if it seems like a high cap rate, understand why it is that.
With it, there's a risk tolerance there. Okay, so hard lessons and kind of war stories. So you guys started with this vision. How have you guys pivoted? What have you learned? Where are you aiming now? Like, what has changed over the last year? Let's call it.
Well, all right, a couple things. I mean, part of it's that we thought people were going to care a lot about the technology, and the truth is that nobody gives a shit. Like, clients don't give a shit. Our partners really don't give a shit, maybe a little bit. So I think we thought being the only tech-enabled QI would win the market. Oh my God, these people have technology.
Look how sexy it is. Look how smooth it is. It has a mobile app.
Yeah, it is a big part of it. It's what we spend 80% of our time on. It doesn't mean that it's not important, but I guess it's just not. People, obviously, it's such a classic talk to customers thing, but talk to customer, what do they care about? Did you answer the phone? Are you fast? What is your fee structure? Are you going to lose my money? And I think technology can be an input to all those things, but you don't say you answer the phone because of technology. You just build really good phone routing and auto messaging and follow-ups based on phones. Our exchange officers seem like superhumans, and they seem like they never forget anything, and they seem like they have infinite time because the technology allows all that
Behind
stuff.
them, yeah.
So I think that's been a big thing. And so we definitely don't lead with technology anymore. I think we more recently launched the portal. And so we're just having the first, few cohorts of customers go through and do it that way. We thought, and we can still think, that self-service could be a big part of this business. People would rather fill out it themselves or go in and do a thing versus call. I think the jury's going to be still out, or there's probably some segmentation there. Some segment of people really want to go in and do it themselves, and some people would rather text us or call us. And I think we're really good at handling both, but we're placing a bet on self-service. And even if it's for a minority of people, those people are going to be able to go really fast, and it's never going to be a mistake if they put it in. You don't have their address wrong. They type their address in wrong. All that, we fix it.
From experience, the smaller the exchange, the more the person actually doing it, the bigger it gets, the more it goes to a CFO, to an account who's running with it, because the owners worry about 10 other things, dealing with investors, dealing with the loan, doing the new assets. So you go into the other parties that help with the transaction.
I think that's totally right. There's a high end of the market that probably is well serviced, because if you've got a tax team and you've got a CFO working on it, you don't need a lot of advice from us. You probably have a pretty specific view of, what your entity structure is and exactly how it's supposed to work. So,
but I'm telling you from experience, no one does the cash management side of this. You put it aside, you're like, let me go worry about 6 months.
And everybody likes no fee. We learned this in our first business. It's like, which escrow company I'm going to use? Well, this one's $800, this one's $600. Like, people are calling the $800 one, asking if they'll price match on the $600 escrow. And so you're talking about multi-million-dollar properties here, and nobody wants to pay an extra $1,500. Or if it's millions of dollars, we're going to pay the client $10,000 to do the exchange with us, do the interest sharing. So we like that. Everybody likes money. Nobody wants to overpay for something, and they should be overpaying.
Okay, so looking back at the more of the entrepreneurial journey, you start deferred again, you go back a year. What do you do differently? What do you have done differently looking back?
Well, it's a good question, because I feel like this one we've avoided a lot of the mistakes and all the other ones.
You paid to learn the game for the last 3 companies.
We got our butt kicked. Well, I think on the first one, you're learning so much, and half the time you're spending time learning things that either don't matter, or once you learn them, you don't need. Like, I spend a lot of time, you have to understand cap tables and modeling and waterfall. And at the end of the day, none of that matters. I know what options are. I can explain them to the team. We have a pretty set formula, and go. So that went from many hours of stress and worry and probably talking to a lawyer more than 0 to nothing. I think it's the thing that we've, this isn't answering a question because I think it's things that we've done well. It's what's the thing that you're trying to work backwards from and prove out? And so I think, our first milestone is we knew we could operate as a QI, but we were what are people going to care about? And how do we figure that? And so that's the only thing that matters, because until we answer this one question, we're not going to be successful. And then I think the second part of that was how can we distribute the products? So we have a list of potentials. We have, growth experiments and potential audiences, and you prioritize them, and you get really specific about the experiments you're running, and actually run those experiments and get them to work or not, and move on to the next one. So what's the question I'm trying to answer to get the business to the next stage of scalable growth, and then being hyper focused on answering those questions. We hit our 1-year anniversary. We incorporated it on May 22nd. So a year and 5 days ago.
You did it.
No, it's cool. And actually it's funny, because I just wrote an email to everybody yesterday, and I was I missed the anniversary. It was I didn't even know. I knew in the back of my mind it was coming up maybe a month ago, and not always looking at the calendar. I just totally blew it. And so I wrote a little bit late or whatever, but it is kind of mind-blowing to go back, because the days are grinding, and you're building little things and writing stuff or having conversations with people partners and winning them over, and it's just a list of God, I made the tiny bit of progress over today. And then you look back over a year and you're well, actually a year ago we had nothing. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any software. We didn't know how to make this grow. We didn't have any people working with us. Now we're 11 people. Yeah. So I don't know. Today I'm in a everything went really well mood. Maybe we do this conversation in 1 year and we're what did you mess up in year 2? Or what did you think you got right in year 1 that you were totally wrong on?
I think all the negative things that happened to you in the past build up to you invested and got paid money to learn all the screw ups that hopefully make this one so much better and the experience better for the employees, the partners, yourself, the business development people, everybody's going to benefit from your life lessons from before.
I think the biggest lesson from all of it was, and especially with this business, is understand, this is from the Balance Home story, but understand what type of risk you're taking on and understand what type of business you're taking on, to the point of you're building the hardest business and you're taking on all this capital markets interest rate risk.
You can't control that either. There's not control whatsoever.
you can't control it at all. So this business, it's like, I mean, there's pieces of it you can't control. Like maybe the tax code will change after 100 years, but everything's execution. It's like, you know what the customer journey is, you know how people find out about it and what people like and don't, and then you're just executing across every little piece of it. And it becomes execution risk as opposed to innovation risk or existential risk. And so I think what's good about this business is that there's a lot more stuff for us to do and build and a lot more people to find out about it, but it's all executable. There's no like unknowns left. It's mostly just like hard work we all have to put in.
What do you think the biggest mistake is for newcomers to 1031 is? Like what do they screw up from the get-go that's an easy fix? Anything you've seen from a higher level?
The biggest mistake that you can make, which is the one we always remind people of, is talk to us before you close, because you can probably fix nearly anything, but once you take constructive receipt of the funds, you're cooked. And so that's the one you just have to know. If you call us 5 minutes before you're closing, that's fine. But if you call us 5 minutes after you're closing, you've got an intractable problem. You're not doing a 1031, I don't think, unless you want to wait another year or something. Pretty much everything is fixable. I think you got to understand the parameters. You got to understand, you're not going to be able to 1031 your primary residence, although there are ways to, all right, so here's a couple of quick strategies. Like if it's your primary residence, rent it out for a year and then 1031 it. Or we see people with large properties, like farmland properties, you can separate your primary residence from your investment use property, and you can, it's like section 121 is the up to $500,000 of capital gains for your primary residence. So you can actually use the section 121 exclusion for $500,000 if you're married, 250 if you're not, and then you can 1031 the remainder. If you divide, your CPA just comes up with a segregation of what the values of the properties are. There's even ways around it if it's your primary residence. And then I think the other piece is like there's a safe harbor to how long an entity needs to hold. So you don't want to like buy a property and then immediately 1031 it. Usually the safe harbor is like 1 year you want to own the property to qualify for a held for investment. But there's different ways that, there's different private letter rulings and different ways that that's been viewed differently. But yeah, basically just don't take receipt of the funds and close. Basically don't close.
Delay the closing.
Delay the closing, go to deferred.com, talk to us for 5 minutes, and then save 40% on taxes. Hey, that's pretty good. You should just
make that a slogan. So question, take yourself back. Let's say you graduate college or graduate Columbia, you put together 50K and now you want to get into real estate. Doesn't have to be 1031. I always like to ask this question. How do you invest that today? In today's world with interest rates, with vacancy, with everything how it is, how would you invest in 50K?
Well, I'm going to ignore the amount. I just think that the markets are so, what's the right word? Like so inefficient, real estate market. And so I think find a market that you really understand, right? Like maybe it's single family houses in a certain place, in a certain condition. Multifamily would be great where you kind of understand what rents should be, or you understand what a neighborhood's doing, or you understand, this weird zoning quirk where actually you can build an extra garage or you could put a commercial space. So I just feel like there's a million little hacks. So like one example in LA, in California, but then in LA specifically, there's
ADUs?
this, wait, what?
ADUs?
Well, ADUs for sure. Yeah, great. That's a great example of $1 million hiding in plain sight, where you can buy a place, put it into you, and now you have two places and you can rent it out. So like, and that most people buying it, they're looking at a comp for a house. They're not looking actually, this house can have an ADU, this one cannot, but no, I was going to go quickly is that there's a rule called tenancy in common. So you can take multifamily properties and actually sell them as tenancy in common. A multifamily property, may sell for $200,000 a unit in LA, which it sounds like a lot. That's like maybe a mid to low end.
Yeah.
But a TIC interest, a saleable, divisible single family TIC would sell, that same unit would be worth $400,000. And so there's an arbitrage there. It's complicated because you got to go through the conversion, you have to deal with tenants and rent control, and certain properties are not going to work and certain ones are, but there's probably 100 properties available in LA that if you're willing to go through the TIC conversion, there's like positive money on it. Now, $50,000, you're going to need to find somebody who's going to loan you some money and take on some risk capital with you. But I think there's just like these zoning inefficiencies, these rental inefficiencies, these growth inefficiencies, or just sale inefficiencies. Somebody sells quickly with a real estate agent who doesn't know. I mean, that was my first house. Like the market, even in 2011, was pretty crazy in LA. Out of town agent, no photos, weird situation, underpriced it by $100,000 or something like that. And I knew it because I was on my hunt. I'd already lost 2 offers. I go the morning after, and I offered over asking, even though they hadn't got any bids yet, and to get it off the market, and that worked. So I think this it's just like, it's a super inefficient market, and it rewards the hustler and the person who's just like clued in and has like a slight information advantage.
But you got to work for it a little bit. And you getting the offers in and getting rejected and actually investing, you get so much more out of it being in the game than from seeing it from far.
That's totally true. You got to get your heart broken. And well, that was the thing back in the open listings days, where we always told everybody, yeah, you want to buy a home, you're going to put your offer on the first one and be so nervous. The thing you need to do is just watch it super closely. Like, watch every home in the neighborhood, understand exactly what it sells for, understand exactly how long it was on the market, understand what agent is selling it and what their process is. Like, there's ways to just beat out the competition just by working harder. But I think in that you need to work and learn and know your niche.
Yep. Listen, man, I really appreciate the time. I think I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody does too. You were awesome. Thanks for being vulnerable, and we got to do it again.
Love it. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for listening.